Maria had always considered herself a woman who had it all. At 32, she was juggling a successful career as a graphic designer, two young children, and a loving husband, David, an accountant. On the surface, their life looked perfect. Their children, aged 6 and 8, were energetic and bright, and they had built a stable life together. David worked long hours to provide for the family, while Maria balanced her work and motherhood. But despite the outward appearance of a flawless life, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The once fiery connection between her and David had started to fade, drowned by the daily grind. The romance they once shared had turned into routine. Quiet dinners, a quick chat about the kids, and the occasional hug. The passion that once ignited their marriage had slowly dimmed. Maria began to feel like she was going through the motions, just another cog in the wheel of their predictable life. She loved her family, but a part of her felt unfulfilled, disconnected from the man she once shared her dreams with. Maria found solace in her community, a close-knit group of neighbors who had become a support system in her life. Among them was Jake, a charming man in his late 30s who had moved into the house next door a year ago. Jake was easygoing, with an infectious laugh and a natural ability to make people feel at ease. His presence in the neighborhood had been a breath of fresh air, especially for the kids, who adored him. What started as casual greetings and polite conversations over the fence soon turned into longer chats as they helped each other with yard work or ran into each other while walking the dog. Maria didn't expect it, but Jake made her feel seen, something she hadn't realized she was craving until he was there. He paid attention to her words, to the way she spoke about her life, her dreams, and even her frustrations. With him, Maria felt hurt in a way that she hadn't in a long time. It was innocent at first, just a neighborly friendship. But each passing day, their interactions grew more meaningful. She began looking forward to their conversations, eager to see Jake, laugh with him, and share her day. The connection was undeniable, and it stirred something deep within Maria that she thought had long since faded. The attraction wasn't immediate, but it started to creep in. The casual exchanges turned into deeper conversations, sometimes lingering until the sun went down. One afternoon, as their children played together in the backyard, Maria and Jake found themselves alone, sitting on the porch. The golden light of the setting sun bathed them in a soft glow, and for a moment, everything felt magical. They laughed about old memories, shared childhood stories, and the conversation naturally flowed. But then, as they sat in the silence that followed, a different tension filled the air. Maria's heart raced as she realized how drawn she was to him. It was a feeling she hadn't had in years, a longing she couldn't easily dismiss. That evening, when David came home from work, Maria couldn't shake the excitement that lingered from her encounter with Jake. She tried to focus on her family, but her mind kept drifting back to him. It wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was more profound, like a hunger that couldn't be satisfied by her ordinary routine. She caught herself looking for Jake when they crossed paths. Her heart skipped a beat every time their eyes met, and the longing in her chest grew stronger each day. The unspoken connection between Maria and Jake had started to consume her thoughts. What began as simple, neighborly camaraderie had morphed into something much more complicated. She told herself it was just a phase, just a passing distraction. But deep down, Maria knew it was more than that. Weeks passed, and Maria's internal struggle grew. She couldn't stop thinking about Jake, about their conversations, their shared laughter, the way he made her feel like the woman she used to be. It was thrilling. For the first time in years, Maria felt alive, as though something was awakening inside her. She told herself that it was harmless, just a friendship, nothing more. But she couldn't ignore the stirrings in her heart. whenever she saw Jake, nor the way her body reacted to his presence. One Friday evening, when David had to work late and the kids were fast asleep by 8 p.m., Maria found herself at a crossroads. She had been feeling a sense of emptiness, a longing for more. The moment felt right, so she decided to walk over to Jake's house to borrow a book she had mentioned earlier. Her heart pounded as she approached his door, not just from the thrill of the moment, but from the fear of what she was doing. Maria hesitated for a moment, but then Jake opened the door with that warm smile she had come to adore. They greeted each other, and she followed him to the porch. The conversation flowed easily, and they spent hours talking under the stars. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and Maria felt the magnetic pull as their eyes locked. She couldn't stop herself from sitting a little closer, feeling the warmth of his body beside hers. The space between them seemed to shrink with every passing moment, until their knees touched. The simple, innocent touch sent a jolt of electricity through Maria. In that instant, it felt like time had stopped. Everything else faded away, and it was just the two of them. She was caught in the spell of the moment, the weight of her emotions pulling her in deeper. Jake reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind Maria's ear, and it felt like the world around them vanished. His touch was gentle, but it ignited a fire within her. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. And it was intoxicating. Before she could even process her thoughts, Jake leaned in, and their lips met in a kiss that sent waves of emotion crashing through Maria. It was soft at first, but as the kiss deepened, Maria's heart raced, her mind spinning with conflicting emotions. She kissed him back, giving in to the rush of excitement, guilt, and desire. The kiss broke as quickly as it had started, leaving Maria breathless. Reality hit her like a wave. She had crossed the line, and she knew it. But even as the guilt began to settle in, there was a part of her that couldn't deny the thrill of what had just happened. She had betrayed David, the man she had promised to love forever. But in that moment, with Jake, Maria felt seen, wanted, and alive in a way she hadn't in years. She spent a few more minutes at Jake's house, but eventually, Maria knew she had to go. She walked back home with a heavy heart, the weight of her actions sinking in with every step. She knew she couldn't keep living this double life, but part of her didn't want to let go of the connection she had found with Jake. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, excitement, confusion, and longing swirled inside Maria. She felt trapped between the love she had for her family and the intense connection she had with Jake. Every glance they shared, every secret conversation, felt like a dangerous game, and as much as she tried to bury her feelings, they continued to resurface. Stronger than ever, the affair, though still in its early stages, was already consuming her thoughts, and Maria realized that the consequences of her actions would eventually catch up with her. As the days passed, Maria found herself increasingly consumed by the affair. Her emotions were a tangled mess, and each passing moment felt like she was walking on a tightrope, balancing between the life she had built with David and the new, exhilarating world she had found with Jake. The guilt weighed heavily on her, but so did the excitement. Every stolen glance, every touch, made her feel more alive than she had in years. But with each moment of thrill, the consequences of her actions loomed ever larger. Maria's life became a careful balancing act. She tried to maintain her role as the devoted wife and mother, all the while knowing she was betraying the very people who trusted her most. David, completely oblivious to the turmoil brewing inside her, continued to shower her with affection. He complimented her. He kissed her goodnight. And he loved her. But the more he loved her, the more Maria's guilt intensified. She was falling for Jake, and every moment spent with him made her feel conflicted and divided. Maria knew she was on borrowed time, But the fear of losing the excitement Jake brought to her life kept her in denial. Her interactions with Jake grew more frequent. What had started as innocent conversations now felt charged with desire and longing. They met in secret, exchanging passionate kisses and sharing stolen moments. The forbidden nature of their relationship added a sense of urgency and danger. And at each time they were together, Maria felt like she was walking closer to the edge. Her heart would race when Jake's hand brushed against hers, and her mind would race with the conflicting emotions of guilt and desire. David noticed the distance growing between them, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Maria tried to brush it off, pretending everything was fine. She wasn't ready to confess, and she wasn't sure if she ever would be. She loved David, but the connection with Jake was undeniable, and Maria didn't know how to end it. The thrill of being wanted, of feeling desired, was intoxicating. But with each passing day, Maria knew she was heading toward a breaking point. She had crossed the line, and the repercussions were starting to take shape in her mind. Her internal conflict reached its peak one evening when David came home early from work. He asked her how her day had been, and she found herself fumbling for an answer. The lie she told him didn't sit right, and she knew it. She couldn't pretend anymore. The guilt gnawed at her, and as David spoke to her about their plans for the weekend, Maria couldn't help but think about Jake. She could hear his voice in her head, his touch still lingering on her skin. Maria realized that she was living a double life, and the pressure of keeping up appearances was beginning to overwhelm her. The burden of her secret weighed heavier with each passing day. It wasn't just the guilt. It was the realization that she was losing herself in the process. The woman who had once been so sure of her love for David was now consumed by her desire for something more, something that couldn't coexist with the life she had promised to build with her husband. The breaking point came sooner than Maria expected. One evening, after a long day, David came home and immediately noticed something was off. Maria tried to act normal, but the weight of the truth was too much for her to carry any longer. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt cold and distant. Maria couldn't pretend anymore. The lies had piled up, and the guilt had become unbearable. Her heart was heavy, and as David began talking about their evening plans, Maria knew she had to face the consequences of her actions. David had always been her rock. He had supported her, loved her, and believed in their family. But now, Maria felt like she was about to shatter everything. She couldn't keep lying to him. Not anymore. She had to tell him the truth. Taking a deep breath, she turned to face her husband. "David, we need to talk," Maria said, her voice trembling. David looked up at her, concern etched on his face. "Is everything okay?" he asked, sensing something was wrong. Maria paused for a moment, struggling to find the right words. Her mind raced as she thought about how to explain what she had done, but there was no easy way out. She couldn't sugarcoat the truth. She had betrayed him, and there was no denying it. "I've made some choices that have hurt us," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been seeing someone else." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. David's face drained of color as the weight of her confession sank in. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, and then to hurt. Maria could see the pain in his eyes, and it cut deeper than any words could express. "Who?" David asked, his voice tight with emotion. Maria hesitated for a moment, the reality of what she had done crashing over her. She knew it was too late to take it back. "Jake," she whispered, unable to meet his gaze. David stood motionless, the silence between them deafening. The hurt in his eyes was more than Maria could bear. She had never seen him like this. The man who had always trusted her, who had loved her unconditionally, was now faced with the devastation of her betrayal. Why, Maria? David asked, his voice breaking. Wasn't I enough for you? Why would you do this? Tears welled up in Maria's eyes as she struggled to answer. She didn't know why. She couldn't explain the emptiness she had felt, the need for something more, or the longing for connection that had driven her into Jake's arms. I'm so sorry, David, she whispered, her voice trembling with regret. I never meant to hurt you. David took a step back, his face a mask of disbelief and sorrow. I need time, he said, his voice cold and distant. I can't look at you right now. Maria's heart shattered as she watched him retreat. The reality of what she had done hit her like a wave. She had lost him. She had lost everything. The guilt overwhelmed her, suffocating her as she realized that her actions had torn their family apart. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional distance between Maria and David grew. The house, once a place of warmth and love, felt like a prison. David worked late, avoiding confrontation and any conversations about their future. Maria, consumed by guilt and regret, tried to reach out to him, but it felt like the chasm between them was widening with each passing day. One evening, as Maria sat alone on the porch, she realized that her life had completely changed. She had hurt the man she loved, and there was no way to undo the damage. But deep down, she knew that the only way forward was to face the truth and rebuild what had been broken. The journey ahead would be long and painful, but it was the only chance she had to find redemption for herself and for her family. The weeks that followed Maria's confession were a blur of emotion. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a cold, sterile place. Every room seemed to echo the silence of unspoken words, and Maria couldn't escape the weight of the decisions she had made. She had broken David's trust, and the pain in his eyes was a constant reminder of the betrayal. But as the days wore on, Maria knew that if she truly wanted to save her marriage, she had to do something more than simply apologize. She had to change. David remained distant, consumed by the hurt and shock of her infidelity. He avoided their conversations, deflecting his feelings by burying himself in work. Maria didn't blame him. She understood that trust, once shattered, was not easily repaired. She had destroyed the foundation of their relationship, and now it was up to her to rebuild it, brick by brick. In the midst of her own emotional turmoil, Maria sought support from her closest friend, Lisa. Maria needed someone to talk to, someone who could help her navigate the complicated path she had created. Sitting in a quiet cafe, Maria opened up to Lisa about everything: the affair, the guilt, the longing, and the overwhelming sense of despair she felt as she faced the consequences of her actions. Maria, you've got to face what you've done, Lisa said gently, her voice filled with compassion. But you can't keep beating yourself up. The question now is, what do you want? Do you want to repair things with David? Do you want to fight for your family? Maria's heart clenched. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to fix things with David, to go back to the life they once shared. But there was also a part of her that felt torn, unsure of whether she could ever truly be the same person again. The woman David had trusted so completely, she had hurt him in a way that felt irreversible. I want to make things right, Maria whispered, the tears finally spilling over. I love him, Lisa. I don't want to lose him, but I've made such a mess of everything. Lisa nodded. I can't tell you what to do, Maria, but I can tell you this: it's going to take time, and it's going to take work. But if you're committed to making it right, then you need to show David that you're willing to do whatever it takes. Maria's heart felt heavy as she left the cafe. But Lisa's words stayed with her. She knew that her journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. If she was going to have any chance of salvaging her marriage, she would have to confront her own mistakes head-on and prove to David that she was worthy of his trust once more. The next morning, Maria made the decision to approach David again. This time, she wouldn't hide behind guilt or shame. She wouldn't try to sugarcoat her actions. Maria knew that if she was going to make things right, she had to be brutally honest, even if it meant facing the painful truth of what had happened. When David came home that evening, Maria sat him down. His face was tired, weary from the emotional strain of the past few weeks. But he sat down quietly, his gaze distant. "I've been thinking a lot," Maria began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I've hurt you, David. I know that what I did was unforgivable, but I want to try. I want to work through this. I want to fight for our marriage." David didn't respond immediately. His silence was deafening, and Maria felt her heart begin to break again. But she had to keep going. She had to prove that she was willing to do whatever it took. "I can't undo what's been done," Maria continued, her voice breaking with the weight of the truth. "But I am committed to rebuilding what we had. If you let me, I want to go to counseling with you. I want to understand what went wrong, why I did what I did. I wanted to work on being the woman you deserve. The wife you deserve." David's eyes flickered with emotion, but he didn't speak right away. Maria waited, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would define the future of their relationship. Finally, David sighed. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Maria, but I'm willing to try. For the kids, for us, we need help." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And that was all she needed. Over the next few weeks, they began therapy together. The process was slow and painful, filled with difficult conversations and moments of raw honesty. There were days when Maria felt like giving up, when the guilt and shame felt like too much to bear. But with each session, she began to understand herself better. She uncovered the reasons behind her actions, the emotional void she had felt, the need for validation, and the desire for something more than the routine of her marriage. David, too, began to open up. The therapy sessions allowed him to express his hurt, his feelings of betrayal, and his confusion. But through it all, he showed a willingness to try, to work through the pain. Slowly, their relationship began to shift. The distance between them started to close, and the connection that had once been lost began to rebuild. Piece by piece. One evening, months after Maria's confession, they sat together on the porch, the sun setting behind them. Maria looked over at David, who was holding her hand. They had been through so much, but they were still here, still fighting. "Do you think we'll ever be the same?" Maria asked softly, her voice full of uncertainty. David squeezed her hand. "I don't know, but I think we're stronger than we were before. We've learned a lot about each other, about ourselves." Maria nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. She had lost herself, but she was finding her way back, one step at a time. And as long as they were together, as long as they kept fighting, Maria knew that they could rebuild their love. Stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. With the time, the scars of the past began to fade, replaced by new memories of love and understanding. They went on dates again, shared the laughter, and took vacations as a family. Maria rediscovered the joy in the simple moments. The way David would make her coffee in the morning, the way he played with the kids in the backyard. She found beauty in the ordinary, in the little things they did together that had once seemed so insignificant. Though Maria would always carry the guilt of her affair, she had learned the importance of communication, honesty, and vulnerability. She had learned that love wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the everyday acts of kindness, the small moments that built a strong foundation. And with David by her side, Maria was ready to embrace the future, knowing that love, once broken, could be healed with time, effort, and a commitment to growth.